Hello and welcome to What's Popping on Luna Lifestyle TV. We are streaming live on Top Star Channel 105. We are also streaming live on our social media platforms. My name is Nsemiwe and today's conversation is quite interesting because we're talking about one of the world's greatest stories ever told, and now it is trending again because there's a movie that will be premiering in July this year, that is 2026, about this particular story that has been told. It is an ancient Greek story and it is entitled The Odyssey. It is quite an interesting story and there's a lot to unpack regarding this particular story. A lot of things to be excited about, and there are so many reasons that you should look forward to this particular story. If you are familiar with the stories that has been told in various ways previously, there are about 24 books previously. It is initially a poem that has been also released in forms of songs and the like, but we dive deep into that with my guest this particular episode of What's Popping, who is Chikondi. How are you, Chikondi?
Thanks. How are you? How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Great to have you back.
Yeah, I've missed this place. It's great to come back to the show.
Last time I have you, we were talking about cartoons that whose themes most people have misinterpreted, and you got to share your views on that. And today we're talking about this particular story that people have to look forward to. But first thing, before we dive into this conversation, let's show the people the trailer of the movie that we're actually talking about, that is The Odyssey. All right, and we are back. And first thing, where did you first listen or hear this particular story of the Odyssey?
Okay, so I've been studying Greek mythology since I was a very, very young person, right? So even hearing that there was a story that was going to come out about Greek mythology, I was all in. But hearing about the Odyssey in particular started with one of the songs from Epic the Musical. Epic the Musical was trending at around 2025. And once I heard the song, I wanted to dig a little deeper, and I had found there were tons of them, up to 40 songs. So listening to these songs is how I had learned about the particular story, that is the Odyssey. And from there, I actually went into the actual Greek origin of where the story had come from.
Now, there might be someone who is watching us right now and has no idea of the origin of this particular story, the Odyssey. Just run us through where it all started from and to where we are now with this particular story.
So years before, we're thinking pre-Jesus times or pre-biblical times, people were on stage performing these great epics. So an epic is a long story that covers journeys of monsters and gods. So the Odyssey is a poem. So you would think a poem is like a one-page document, right? You say it and then it's done. But then back then, poems were as long as novels, right? So they were performed in this da-dum, da-dum, da-dum sort of sound.
So that's like the rhythm of the poem?
The rhythm of the poem. So in the original story, it was in ancient Greek, so you really would not get the same experience that you would in English. but there have been interpretations of it, and the English interpretations have added up to 24 books. So the Odyssey is about this hero named Odysseus, and it's about his journey to the Trojan War, but more importantly, his journey back, because it was promised that he was going to come back home. This was supposed to be a 6 months journey, and it ended up taking 20 years because he had been cursed by one of the monsters that he was fighting. The monster had placed a curse on him that he may never return home. But if the fates have it that he should return, it's going to take a very, very long time for him to do it.
Okay, that's really interesting. But now it has been taught in different forms. As you said, it was initially a poem, and now there have been songs. It has been turned into a number of other forms of entertainment. But now, what's exciting is that a movie will be actually released based on this particular story. And each time a story is being told, there's always spices that people add to these stories. And what's your take on, do you think that anything has changed from the times that this particular poem has been performed or has been presented to the people in different forms?
I am pretty sure that there are other versions of the Odyssey out there, but the ones that I'm familiar with and the most popular ones right now are the ones created by Jorge Rivera. He has made 40 songs that have been written in the traditional lyrical style, but then amplified to be actual songs, not just poems. So in him making these songs, it had become a huge indie project with so many collaborators who had animated the 40 songs that he had composed. And the 40 songs that he had composed have now been compiled into one movie that you could check out on YouTube. And the project had taken 5 years to do. It was only completed last year. But in the process of these songs coming out, Christopher Nolan decided that he was going to take his own version of the Odyssey, which I do suspect is going to be a lot more faithful to the way that the book was once written, because Christopher Nolan has this more grounded way of telling stories. The large difference between the version that you find online and the one that's going to be released soon is the one that you find online has a more family-friendly approach. It's all songs, of course, and that's whimsical enough. But then the elements that have been taken out from the original story that are quite unsavory and have been replaced with a more whimsical, more stylized way of this way the story was told. But it looks like Christopher Nolan is going to go back to its roots and tell the story as it's supposed to be told, no matter how dark and gritty or unsavory the story is.
What really makes you sure that he will stay true to the actual story?
Considering the stuff that he has released before, right about 2 years ago, 1 year ago, he also released Oppenheimer, which was more of a mock documentary about the atom bomb, right? And it's a very, very dark retelling of how the atom bomb was created. And people were making fun of it online because the time Oppenheimer was coming out, the Barbie movie was also coming out. So it was like this odd, ironic thing that something so dark and something so light was going to be released at the exact same time. And the most famous version of Batman, this dark and gritty version of Batman, was popularized by Christopher Nolan. That's the Batman from The Dark Knight Rises. Before that, Batman was known as... he was more dark than most heroes, but not as dark as Christopher Nolan made him out to be. This very grounded and very realistic version of him was made popular because of him. And directors very rarely deviate from their style.
Well, let's talk of the creative side of things, when people are getting to dilute a story to fit the market they are targeting, obviously, and to give it maybe a more friendly approach. Do you think it's really necessary or important for writers to consider all that as they are writing, or just telling the story as dark as it is okay for the art?
I would believe that originally, between, let's say, 2004 to right now, there's been a shift to a more realistic tone in Hollywood, right? So Hollywood has taken this more grounded approach because people are getting tired of the sunny and unrealistic way that life was, because things can't always be sunny and things can't always be the way that you idealistically think of them. So a lot of the movies that were coming out at the time had this very, very dark tone, right? So there's going to be a return to form to that. So when Jorge released his version, it was an opposite of what people were expecting. Because a lot of people were more into this dark tone. He had released something that was lighter. So it appealed to more people at the time when all the movies were dark. Because sometimes you just want to relax, you just want to watch something with the kids, and you just don't want to be burdened by the way real life is. So now there's a shift in the way Hollywood and people are seeing things now, because right now there's an opposite shift where people want more stylized, more upbeat things because of how horrible the world has become these days. And they want to escape from that.
Now, Chikondi, this story has been told for over 2,000 years now. And it's one of those popular myths or ancient hero stories that have been told, but it's still relevant to date that we still have a movie that will be dropped in July. What makes this particular story relevant even to this date after so many years of it being told?
It's a classic. Classical stories explore themes that a lot of modern stories tend to ignore because these are more modern stories kind of focus on what's going on right now, right? So classical stories tend to stand the test of time because these are stories that have hard life lessons which are really hard to deal with but are important to learn. You can think about stories like Animal Farm or Things Fall Apart, or even stories like Romeo and Juliet. They stand the test of time because these are stories that were written years ago and have survived so long because they move people in ways that modern storytelling cannot.
I took time to read a few articles about this particular story, the Odyssey. And one thing that I noticed, part of the story, or the part that I got, was this particular man is striving to get back home to his wife, and the journey that is supposed to take 6 months takes over 10 years. And there's that aspect of the story. And then there's the story of the struggle that actually leads to him taking longer. So which part of the story do you think really resonates with our generation now? Is it the struggle? Is it the idea of getting back home?
The thing that I like about Jorge Rivera's interpretation is it's important to know your why, right? That is the only thing that kept him going. His love for his wife and he loved his child, but it seems to very heavily imply that his wife was the most important thing in his life. So much so that Jorge had removed the fact that he was a cheating husband in the original story and had made him a more pure man to further amplify this idea that love conquers all, right? But then that's kind of besides the point. The more important point here is you must know the reason why you are doing things. What is your North Star? What is the thing that you want to achieve? And if you know what your North Star is, there's pretty much nothing that could stand in your way.
And so that's probably why this generation is linked to that. It's people understanding their why.
Yes.
Interesting. But aside from our generation now, you, Chikondi, what do you think? What's the part of the story that you would love to remain as it was in the original story, even as we anticipate for this movie?
I want the monsters to be there, right?
Why do you love dark things?
I am worried that the Christopher Nolan version might be too grounded. I am a huge fantasy person, right?
And I noticed you love dark stories and dark humor.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fantasy person.
Yeah.
So I'm just hoping that gods are not reduced to symbols. Because in other works like 300 or Gladiator, the gods didn't show up because they were more focused in telling just the real story, and they left religion as religion. These are the things that people believe and nothing more. And honestly, I'll be one of the people who said I found 300 kind of boring for it, because yeah, it had action in it, but well, the monsters, where is all the magic? I want to see a world that's different than the world that we live in. So I prefer Greek stories like The Blood of Zeus or Clash of the Titans, where monsters and magic exist. So my worry with the Christopher Nolan version that's going to come out is they're going to reduce these gods to nothing but symbols. But I also think that's not the direction that it's going to go somewhat. Because Zendaya has been cast as Athena. So we know one of the gods is going to be there. And Athena was a very central part of the story. So if Athena is there, I think it's evidence that there is going to be magic and gods that are going to be represented there. In a more grounded way, yes. But at the very least, it's not going to be just people fighting in loincloths.
Let's talk of more ancient Greek stories or ancient stories in generally that you think they also need to be brought back to life as they are doing to the Odyssey.
I think the Iliad should be one of the stories that they should come back. The Iliad was also written by Homer, and it also surrounds the Trojan War. So if they're going to focus so much on the Odyssey, the Iliad should also make a comeback.
Okay. What about it makes you desire for it to come back?
It's one of the stories I haven't really read up on. I want to see what happened compared to what happened in the Odyssey, because the Iliad focuses on different heroes than the Odyssey does, because the Trojan War involved so many heroes, right? The Odyssey just focused on Odysseus. The Iliad also has other heroes like Achilles, Jason, Ajax. I want to see stories that involve them.
Yeah, I know you to be a person that critically looks at movies. Whenever you're watching a movie, you notice things that most of us overlook, because for some of us it's just mere entertainment, but for you it's not just entertainment. You analyze and critique. What's one part of the story do you think people don't really get about the Odyssey?
Okay, so this is just a fair warning for people who had watched Epic the Musical and are going to watch the Odyssey and might be surprised to find out that Odysseus actually had affairs with these other gods.
He wasn't faithful.
He was not faithful. The indie version shows him as a faithful man who's going to do whatever it takes to go back to his wife and respect the marriage. But you have to understand that in ancient Greek culture, women were not respected. It's to the point that there were these two groups, right? The Athenians and the Spartans, right? So people think when they hear that in Sparta, women held power and were as equals, that it was something liberating to them. When really back then, it was an insult. It was insulting to have a woman have the exact same sort of authority a man would. And because of their lack of respect for women, there are just a lot of stories based on men getting away with things that a woman is just not allowed to. For example, as I said, Odysseus had multiple affairs, and Penelope, who was his wife, is assumed to never have had an affair with Atreus, or did have an affair. And when she did have an affair, it was seen as this very, very huge sin as compared to Odysseus having children outside of his marriage. So this thing is a big warning for those people who are going into the film thinking it's going to be exactly the same. It's not going to be exactly the same. There are going to be a lot of things that are going to change, which are going to be very unsavory. But it's the way that the story has been told, and there is space for it in the world.
Well, Chikondi is giving us those warnings based on his opinion and his expectations based on the history of the writer of the movie that will be dropping later on this year. That is in July. That is the Odyssey story, ancient Greek story that has been told. And I would honestly love to see more Zambian ancient stories being told. Like I would love to see the comeback of Lenshina among other stories. Are you familiar with a lot of Zambian stories?
I am familiar with some. I've heard about Rosemary, and I've also heard about the Nyami Nyami in the Victoria Falls.
Yeah, Nyami Nyami is an interesting story.
I really wanted to see that come back. People don't even really know that Nyami Nyami had a wife. You know that he had a wife?
Yeah, I heard the story of the Nyami Nyami having a wife and being split during the construction of the Kariba Dam and all that. I'd love to see a movie or a cartoon and animation around those particular stories. I'd love it. I'd love Zambian filmmakers to take that route. But as Zambian filmmakers consider that, and many other countries, do you think it is good for filmmakers to stay 100% true to the actual stories, or
no,
they can modernize some characters?
The thing with art is it's a form of self-expression. So you're looking into the mind of the writer when you're reading his work or you're watching his films. That's why there exists two different versions of a story, and both can still be acceptable, because you're looking at the way that this artist understands the world through their own lens.
All right, Chikondi, as we wrap up, I'll give you quick fire questions and you'll have to answer without thinking much about them.
Okay.
Yeah, you ready?
Yeah.
Favorite character in the Odyssey?
Odysseus.
Why?
I mean, he's the most... Okay, I'm going to say the Odysseus from the Rivera version, because that's some admirable love for your own wife. I have to admit, many men of this generation would not spend 20 years and not cheat on the wife or constantly think about them to this way. This is a man worth dying for.
How do you know? Are you married?
Of course not, but I have eyes. I can see.
Okay, the next one is, what's the most dangerous moment in the Odyssey?
When they were killing the Cyclops, most of the men were killed. So I wouldn't, not most of the men, a lot of them were killed. But I wouldn't say it's the most dangerous part of the story, because a lot of other men were killed, but it's one of the more intense. I would say secondly is the battle with Scylla.
Okay.
That was very intense.
Okay, and the lesson modern people can take from the Odyssey?
Know your why. Have a North Star. It's very, very important that you have something in your way that you're going to focus on. That guides you no matter what, because that is going to give you so much clarity in your life.
Okay, I was about to ask the last one, but I think you've already tackled this. It's one thing that you hope they don't mess up in the movie, and I think you've labored on this already. But thank you so much for coming through and giving us your thoughts on what you expect from the Odyssey movie, and probably hoping that they stay true to the story, but a little bit of changes won't hurt to just make the story interesting. But we hope that they stick to the journey, the getting home and everything else. And thank you so much for coming through again. We will definitely call on you again, especially when the movie's out.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be of service.
All right, thank you so much, Chikondi. And to our dear viewers, thank you so much for joining me on What's Popping. We were talking the Odyssey, an ancient Greek story that has been told over 2,000 years. And now we are seeing a movie that is being done. That will be premiered rather in July based on this particular story. We expect some changes in the story because obviously the writers and everyone working on the movie has the right to add their own artistic eye to it. But we expect also them to stay true to the actual story that is simply about the desire to get home and the idea of it not only moving through the obstacles but also growing, as that's the story that I personally got when I was reading this particular story of the Odyssey. I've not watched anything yet because I don't want to spoil my desire and excitement for the new thing, and I hope that this didn't spoil your will to actually watch the actual movie, but just made you more curious and willing to watch once it is premiered. Until next time, I have been your good buddy Nsemiwe alongside Chikondi, who was giving us his insights and his thoughts on this particular story. Until next time, stay tuned to Duna Lifestyle TV channel 105.